Choosing yourself rarely begins with a dramatic declaration or a sudden surge of confidence. More often, it begins quietly, almost invisibly, with a sense of emotional fatigue that you can no longer explain away. You may notice that you are constantly tired, even when you are resting, not just physically tired, but mentally and emotionally drained. This exhaustion comes from years of placing your own needs at the bottom of the list, from living in a way that prioritizes approval, harmony, and acceptance over authenticity. At some point, you realize that you have been shaping your life around what others expect from you. You adjust your personality depending on who you are with. You soften your truth to avoid conflict. You dismiss your own discomfort by telling yourself that it is not that serious, that others have it worse, or that you should simply be grateful. Over time, this pattern creates a quiet inner emptiness. You are functioning, but you are not fulfilled. You are present, but not fully alive. When you finally begin choosing yourself, the first shift is not action, but awareness. You start seeing your own behavior clearly, sometimes for the first time. You notice how quickly you say yes before checking in with yourself, how often you apologize for taking up space, how easily you doubt your feelings when they inconvenience someone else. This awareness can feel uncomfortable, even painful, because it exposes how deeply you have learned to abandon yourself. There is often confusion at this stage. You may ask yourself whether you are being selfish or ungrateful. You may worry that focusing on yourself will make you less loving, less kind, or less worthy of connection. These fears are natural, especially if you were taught that love is something you earn by being useful, agreeable, or self-sacrificing. But choosing yourself does not mean becoming cold or careless. It means becoming honest. Honesty with yourself is the foundation of this transformation. You begin listening to your emotions instead of suppressing them. You recognize that discomfort is not a weakness, but a signal that something in your life is misaligned. Instead of pushing that signal away, you allow it to guide you. You ask different questions, not what will make everyone happy, but what feels true to me. This stage often comes with guilt, because guilt is the voice of old conditioning. It is the echo of beliefs that told you your needs were secondary. Feeling guilty does not mean you are doing something wrong. It means you are doing something new. You are breaking a pattern that once kept you safe but no longer serves you. Choosing yourself begins here, in these quiet moments of self-awareness. It is not about changing everything at once. It is about stopping the habit of self-betrayal. It is about allowing your inner voice to matter again. And in that simple, courageous act, a new relationship with yourself begins. After awareness comes resistance. This is one of the most difficult and misunderstood stages of choosing yourself. Once you begin honoring your needs, the world around you does not immediately adjust. In fact, it often pushes back. People who benefited from your silence, your flexibility, and your constant availability may become confused, disappointed, or even upset. This reaction can feel deeply unsettling, especially if your sense of belonging was built on being easy to please. When you start setting boundaries, even gentle ones, you may feel as though you are doing something wrong. Saying no feels heavy. Taking space feels uncomfortable. Speaking honestly feels risky. This is because boundaries force you to sit with the fear of disapproval. You begin to realize how much of your behavior was driven by the need to be liked or needed. Choosing yourself brings this truth into sharp focus. There is often grief in this stage. You grieve the version of yourself that survived by shrinking. You grieve relationships that begin to change when you stop overgiving. Some connections may weaken or fall away entirely. This does not mean those relationships were false, but it does reveal the conditions they were built upon. When your value was measured by what you provided, withdrawing that role can feel like loss on both sides. Internally, a battle often unfolds between your old identity and your emerging self. The old identity says, go back, keep the peace, don't make things complicated. The emerging self whispers, this hurts, but it's honest. You may oscillate between confidence and doubt. One day you feel empowered, the next day you feel selfish or confused. This emotional fluctuation is normal. Growth rarely feels stable in the beginning. Choosing yourself at this stage requires patience and self-compassion. You are unlearning years of conditioning, not flipping a switch. Each boundary you set, even imperfectly, strengthens your self-trust. Each moment you pause before sacrificing yourself builds inner alignment. You begin to realize that discomfort does not mean danger, it means adjustment. Another important realization emerges here. You cannot choose yourself and be chosen by everyone. Some people will resist your growth because it disrupts the version of you they were comfortable with. This is painful, but it is also clarifying. You start to see who respects your boundaries and who only respected your compliance. Slowly, something shifts. The guilt softens. The fear loses its intensity. You begin to experience a quiet relief. You no longer feel as drained or resentful. Your energy returns because it is no longer constantly leaking outward. You are still kind, still caring, but no longer at your own expense. This stage teaches you that choosing yourself is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. It is choosing honesty over harmony, alignment over approval. And while it may cost you some comfort and familiarity, it begins to give you something far more valuable, self-respect. As you continue choosing yourself, something subtle but powerful begins to change inside you. The constant inner tension starts to ease. You are no longer negotiating with yourself at every decision point. There is a growing sense of clarity, not because life has become easier, but because you are no longer divided against yourself. This is the stage where self-trust begins to form. Self-trust develops when your actions start matching your inner truth. In the past, you may have known what you needed but ignored it to avoid discomfort or conflict. Each time you did that, a small fracture formed in your relationship with yourself. Now, as you follow through on what you feel and know, those fractures begin to heal. You start believing yourself again. Your intuition feels sharper. Your decisions feel cleaner. With this comes a new relationship with solitude. Being alone no longer feels like rejection or emptiness. Instead, it becomes space. Space to think clearly, to feel without interruption, to hear your own voice without the noise of expectation. You may find that you crave less external stimulation and validation, not because you have become distant, but because you are finally connected to yourself. This shift can feel unfamiliar. When you stop chasing approval, life becomes quieter. There are fewer emotional highs and lows, less drama, less urgency. At first, this calm may feel strange, even unsettling, especially if chaos once felt like normal. But over time, you recognize this calm as peace. Your standards also begin to change. You become more intentional with where you place your time, energy, and emotional investment. You no longer feel obligated to explain yourself to everyone. You choose conversations that feel real. You choose commitments that align with your values. This does not make you rigid or closed off. It makes you selective. In relationships, this stage often reveals itself as depth over quantity. You may have fewer connections, but they feel more authentic. You are no longer performing a version of yourself to maintain closeness. You allow yourself to be seen as you are. Some people meet you there. Others drift away. And while that can still hurt, it no longer shakes your sense of self. There is also a noticeable shift in how you handle challenges. When something goes wrong, you are less likely to panic or blame yourself. You approach problems with curiosity instead of self-criticism. You ask, what is this teaching me? Instead of what is wrong with me. This mindset creates resilience. You recover faster. You adapt more gracefully. Choosing yourself at this stage feels less like effort and more like alignment. You are no longer forcing growth. You are allowing it. The internal resistance that once made everything feel heavy begins to dissolve. You trust that you can handle whatever arises because you have proven it to yourself again and again. This is where you realize that choosing yourself was never about becoming someone new. It was about returning to who you were before you learned to abandon yourself. And in that return, a quiet strength takes root, steady, grounded, and deeply unshakable. At this final stage, choosing yourself is no longer something you consciously think about. It becomes the foundation from which you live. You are not constantly asking whether you should honor your needs or silence them. The choice has already been made. You live from self-respect rather than self-negotiation, and this changes how you move through the world in a profound way. One of the clearest signs of this stage is emotional stability. Life still brings uncertainty, loss, and unexpected challenges, but they no longer knock you off center. You feel your emotions fully, yet they do not control your behavior or define your identity. There is a deep sense of grounding inside you, as if you are standing firmly in yourself, no matter what is happening around. Undue. This inner steadiness becomes your true safety. You also stop seeking permission to be who you are. Your values guide your decisions more than fear, comparison, or approval. You speak honestly, not to provoke or defend, but because authenticity feels natural. Silence becomes a choice rather than avoidance. Action becomes intentional rather than reactive. You are no longer living in anticipation of how others will respond to you. At this level, boundaries are effortless. You do not need to justify them or explain them repeatedly. You simply live them. When something does not align with your well-being, you step away without resentment or guilt. When something feels right, you move toward it without overthinking. This clarity saves enormous emotional energy, freeing you to focus on what truly matters. Relationships transform even further. You no longer approach connection from need, but from fullness. You are capable of deep intimacy without losing yourself. Love becomes something you share, not something you use to feel complete. If someone chooses to stay in your life, it is because there is mutual respect and resonance. If they leave, you grieve if needed, but you do not abandon yourself in the process. There is also a quiet confidence that emerges, one that does not need to be announced or proven. You trust your pace, you trust your path. Comparison loses its grip because you are no longer measuring your life against someone else's journey. You understand that alignment matters more than speed, and depth matters more than appearance. Perhaps the most powerful shift at this stage is your relationship with fear. Fear may still appear, but it no longer dictates your choices. You recognize it as a signal, not a command. You listen, assess, and then act from clarity rather than avoidance. Courage becomes less about forcing yourself forward and more about staying true to yourself even when it is uncomfortable. Choosing yourself fully does not make life perfect. It makes it honest. You experience joy more deeply because you are present. You experience pain more cleanly because you are not resisting it. You live with integrity, knowing that no matter what happens, you will not betray yourself to survive or belong. This is what happens when you finally choose yourself. You stop living as a reaction to the world and start living as a response from within. You become your own anchor. And from that place, life no longer feels like something you must endure. It becomes something you participate in, consciously, steadily, and fully alive.